Welcome to the 2026 Scoper Lecture in Christian Thought, featuring Nancy and David French on telling the truth, stories of courage, conflict, and connection. I hope that you enjoy this video of a wonderful event at University of Virginia's Old Cabell Hall, where we came together for music, for conversation, for questions about what it means to have an honest conversation, to tell the truth in hard places, and to find connection even across difference.
You are going to really hear things from David and Nancy French that makes a difference, I believe, in how we live, how I live. This lecture series is so important to my wife Nancy and me, as we're able to bring others, thought leaders in from around the country to teach us things that we may not hear otherwise. So thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon. My name is Fionette King, and I'm a fourth year here at UVA pursuing a bachelor's degree in global development studies and a master's in public policy. I also serve as the current nonprofit management intern for Theological Horizons. On behalf of all of us here at Theological Horizons, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the 2026 Scoper Lecture in Christian Thought with Nancy and David French. We are delighted to be here with you in Old Cabell Hall for this special afternoon. Thank you, Paul Zach of the Porter's Gate, for sharing your gift of music to create such a welcoming environment for this lecture. As we get started, I would like to share a few reminders. Today's keynote event is being recorded. To access the recording later, you can visit the Theological Horizons YouTube channel or sign up for our emails to receive reminders for the April 9th online film premiere. We kindly request that there be no flash photography. Please take a moment to silence your devices and put them away. For students who missed it on the way in, be sure to stop by the Theological Horizons table on your way out to sign up and be a part of continuing today's conversation with new friends and free coffee. Now, we invite you all to listen to one more song by Paul and Friends as we settle in to hear from a few distinguished guests, and then listen attentively to Nancy and David's stories of courage, conflict, and connection.
All will be well. All will be well. All will be well. All will be well. Don't let anything disturb you. Don't let this make you afraid. Though the worst is getting worse now, all these things will pass away. Every morning has a sunset. Every dark night has a dawn. Patience tells you you're not done yet. Day will come and you'll go on. Though you're tired and you're frightened, though your dreams are full of dread, still the love of God suffices for whatever lies ahead. Though the world is bent on conquest, all its riches turn to rust. You have God, so you have all things. God alone will be enough. Though the sands of time are shifting, but God's love will never change. When that final veil is lifted, you'll see you've always known His face. God is with you now at midnight. God is with you now at noon. If you fall or if you still fight, God will not abandon you.
Thank you so much, Paul. That was just beautiful. Don't you wish you could sing like that? Okay, my goodness. Good afternoon. I'm Steve Scoper, and my wife, Nancy, and daughter Julia and I are honored to welcome you to the annual Scoper Lecture in Christian Thought, which brings together leading thinkers to the University of Virginia to explore the breadth of Christian expression. Let me say that one more time. To explore the breadth of Christian expression in so many different areas, such as science, medicine, culture, and the arts. This fifth annual Scoper Lecture in Christian Thought is presented by Theological Horizons, which is a nonprofit that supports believers and also spiritually curious people by providing a welcoming community for engaging in faith, thought, and life here at UVA and beyond. I'd like to thank the Theological Horizons Board of Directors and staff, the Lecture Host Committee, and our co-host, UVA's Project on Lived Theology and the Virginia Festival of the Book. The Project on Lived Theology at UVA studies the social consequences of theological ideas for the sake of a more just and compassionate world. The Virginia Festival of the Book unites readers, writers, and artists for discourse, inspiration, and connection. I have no doubt each of us will leave this lecture with a deepened commitment to finding and telling the truth in our own lives and communities. Now, it's my honor to introduce Dr. Danny Avula, Mayor of City of Richmond, who will introduce this year's lectures. Dr. Avula took office as mayor of the city of Richmond in January of 2025, so just a year ago. Before his election, Dr. Avula served in various public health and civic leadership positions, including he was the director of the Richmond and Enrico Health Districts and commissioner of the Virginia Department of Social Services. Dr. Avula is a pediatrician who was named one of Richmond's top docs each year from 2013 to 2022 and works as a hospitalist at Chippenham Hospital. In all of his roles, Danny has championed increasing access to care for the most vulnerable residents, addressing root causes that shape health outcomes, and leading transformational work to support families in sustainable pathways out of poverty. Danny holds degrees from the University of Virginia, Virginia Commonwealth University, and Johns Hopkins. A father of 5, Danny and his wife, Mary Kay, have lived in Richmond's East Side for 20 years. Thank you for joining us back at your alma mater in Charlottesville today. Danny.
Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you for everything you guys do to make this space possible. It is a real joy to be back on grounds. Even being here in this room in Old Cabell Hall brings back so many memories of classes, of lectures, of events, and so many a cappella concerts that I can't even count. I have learned that that is kind of normal to talk about here in Charlottesville, but literally anywhere else in the world, if I talk about a cappella, it's super weird. So I'm glad I can do that here. This place, this institution have really shaped me in profound ways. And it was here at the University of Virginia that my faith, my Christian life became real. And ultimately, it propelled me on the path of racial healing and justice work that have been integral to my calling as a physician, as a public health doc, and now in elected politics. One of the most challenging seasons of my career was the COVID pandemic. And I had during that time, the responsibility and the privilege to lead Virginia's vaccination effort. And that time was really challenging, not just because of kind of the intensity and urgency of the public health response, but also because of what it revealed about the state of our society. What should have been a collective problem-solving effort where we would make science-based decisions to thoughtfully weigh risks and benefits and protect the most vulnerable members of our community became something else entirely. The nature of my conversations with people up in Northern Virginia varied wildly from those with neighbors from predominantly Black communities in urban parts of the state, or from Virginians in Appalachia who were seeing all of this through the lens of how big pharma and government had rubber-stamped the opioid epidemic. The onslaught of information through our social media feeds, through our hyper-polarized mainstream media, through word of mouth, the misinformation, the disinformation, the real information, like who even knew anymore? And so what happened was that conversations broke down and trust eroded, and questions of health and safety became deeply entangled with identity and politics. And in many ways, we are still living in the shadow of that moment. Now, serving in elected office, I see how that same dynamic has continued to shape our public life. Our discourse has become sharper, more reactive, more divided. We're often quicker to assume the worst of one another than we are to extend grace to one another. And yet, the work of building a healthy community, a healthy democracy, depends on something very different. It depends on people who are willing to tell the truth, to engage across a difference, and to do so with a spirit grounded not in fear, but in love. And that's why it is such a gift to have Nancy and David French here with us today. Together, these two have built lives and vocations that are deeply rooted in faith and deeply engaged with some of the hardest questions facing our culture today. Nancy is a New York Times bestselling author, an investigative journalist, and a powerful voice for truth and transparency. She's collaborated with public figures across politics and culture, and she has taken on the kind of difficult and costly work that many would rather avoid, including a multi-year abuse investigation in a deeply loved Christian institution. Her memoir, Ghosted: An American Story, was named ECPA's 2025 Christian Book of the Year. And I will tell you, it is riveting. This will surprise anyone who knows me because I am not very good at reading. I just can't sit still for long enough. But I read this book in a week, and I was so compelled by the rawness and the hilarity and the profoundness of her story and of their collective story. David has also had a remarkable career as a journalist. He was a senior writer for the National Review, later for The Atlantic, and now is an opinion columnist for the New York Times, where he writes about law, culture, religion, and the state of our democracy. But before his work in journalism, he spent more than 2 decades as an attorney defending free speech and religious liberty. He served our country as an Army JAG officer and actually applied for an age exemption so that he could go and get deployed to Iraq out of his sense of conviction to serve our country. But what is especially meaningful is how their work has been so fully integrated into the central calling of their lives, their marriage, their family, and ultimately their participation in God's work of redemption, justice, and mercy. They've been willing to step into some of the most difficult and contested spaces of our public life. David's book, Divided We Fall, names the real risks of polarization in our country and challenges us to find a way forward that allows people with deep differences to live together with mutual respect. And together, Nancy and David, through the After Party, they've helped call us to a healthier and more faithful engagement with politics, one that resists the pull of outrage and instead reflects the character of the one in whom our faith resides, Jesus himself. This isn't easy work. It has required courage and humility, and often it has come to personal cost to them. But it is the work that they, and I hope increasingly all of us, are called into. The call to love our neighbors, to love our enemies, to see the image of God in those that we agree with and in those that we don't. It is a joy to welcome on stage this afternoon our amazing moderator, the Executive Director of Theological Horizons, Karen Wright Marsh, and David and Nancy French.
Thank you for coming indoors on this beautiful March afternoon at the University of Virginia. It is such a delight. Thank you, Danny, for that, Mayor Danny, may I say, for that beautiful introduction of our honored guests. As we begin a conversation about the question, how do we tell the truth in ways that both require courage and yet still leave room for connection? I have the privilege of beginning the conversation with some questions, and I'd like to begin with a personal one. You have been married for 29 years, am I right? So you've seen a lot of each other. So I would love for you each to talk about a time when you were surprised to witness the other tell the truth, whether it was large or small, and the impact that it had on you.
So we got married in 1996 and lived in New York City, and then after 1 year of not seeing my husband at all, we decided to move to Kentucky. And we went to this church, an Assembly of God church that was so wonderful. It was probably the best church experience that we've ever had. It was Pentecostal. We had Holy Spirit conga lines.
No exaggeration, Holy Spirit conga lines.
So yes. If you want to sync us politically, just go find those videos. But we just loved this church so much, and it was very vibrant in rural Kentucky. It was not an affluent church. We joked that the cars were held together by Jesus bumper stickers. There was one pediatrician and one lawyer, and this was the lawyer. And we thought it was so interesting after we started worshiping there that there was an attack on the church for noise ordinance, through a noise ordinance, and because it was Pentecostal, but we were a little loud, and the neighbor did not like it, and so there was this unconstitutional attack on the church, whereas the neighbor did not protest over the local tractor pool, which was on the other side of the house. But anyway, so David actually was amazing. We were like, oh, isn't God wonderful that he took this Harvard-educated free speech attorney and dropped him in this rural Kentucky congregation just when they needed it? And so he was able to do it. It went all the way to federal court, and it was a precedent-setting court decision, and it was just really amazing. It was one of those things that you could write a book about, like, you know, God really takes care of his people. So fast forward a couple of years, and there was this guy named Dale, and he came to the congregation, and he was not someone who had a J-O-B. And he did not want us to have J-O-Bs because we shouldn't work for the man. And the pyramid scheme went through the entire congregation, including like the pastoral staff. And so David had experience in fraud, right? Because we lived in New York and he had done cases like that. So I was thinking, oh, isn't it wonderful that God in his mercy. So we went to the local meeting to find out how not to have a J-O-B, and it was pretty farcical. And so David was like, oh, guys, good news. I know that this is fraud, and y'all can rid yourself of this pyramid scheme situation. And all of them turned on us. Like, you would not believe, they were so mad at us because we were, and it was really him, because okay. My terminal degree is Henry County High School, 1993, so all of this I say through humility. I would totally join a pyramid scheme accidentally. So let the record show. So it was him. And so everybody was so mad at him, this guy, and he had risked his career over the free speech thing because for some reason law firms don't totally love you taking cases for oppressed minorities. They don't pay that well. And so he had to stand up, and he almost lost his job for this congregation. And then the breaking point was Dale. And they trusted Dale over David. Now, of course, in retrospect, though no one has come to us and told us that they were sorry about it. The whole Dale thing did not work out. But it was just one of those things. This was when we were very first married, and it should have been a clarion call. It should have been something that a harbinger of things to come. But I'm shocked constantly at the response to truth telling.
Yeah. So with Nancy, the Nancy story, if you go, let's fast forward from 1996 to 2016. And so many of you remember quite well the events of 2016 and sort of the back and forth politically that occurred. It was sort of like whoever had the last scandal was going to lose in 2016. So you would just go, like Hillary had a scandal, then it'd be Trump had a scandal, and then, and it was just back and forth, and it was this close. And so towards the very end, a lot of women came forward and were talking about their experience and were testifying about their experience of sexual assault and or sexual harassment with Donald Trump. And Nancy and I were not, you guys might not know this, but I have been opposed to Donald Trump some. I just want to get that out.
Really?
Like, get the elephant in the room out of there. But anyway, so Nancy was deeply disturbed at the fact that an awful lot of people seem to be sort of in our evangelical world overlooking all of these claims. And so Nancy had terrible experience with abuse in the church, terrible experience. And she came to me one day and she said, I think I should write about this because people ask me why I feel so passionately that, about this person, this candidate, like what is it that makes me feel so passionate about it? And so Nancy, I said, yeah, Nancy, I think you should totally write about this. And she said, okay, I'm thinking the Washington Post. Now, bear in mind, she'd never publicly talked about her abuse before. So she just decides to just Washington Post it up. Like, we have this very similar gene, both of us do. I would call it, I know this reference is going to miss everyone because I'm the hyper nerd in the room. I would call it the Leroy Jenkins gene after a very famous moment in the world of Warcraft about 15 years ago. But y'all aren't getting that. I would call it the Charge of the Light Brigade gene, where it's like cannons to the right of them, cannons to the left of them. We're just going forward. And so she writes about it in the Washington Post. And, I didn't expect that people would read it and then go, okay, I'm changing my political point of view. But at the very least, I thought they would read it and understand more where she was coming from. And understand that one of the reasons why she had joined the political movement that she had joined was because she saw this movement as standing up against mistreatment of women and sexual harassment and sexual assault. And had been through everything with Bill Clinton in 1998 and had remembered the Southern Baptist Convention statement on character in politicians that tolerance of serious wrong by our leaders will sear the conscience of a culture, will lead to unrestrained lawlessness, and surely will result in God's judgment. That's 1998, Southern Baptist Convention. And so Nancy thought, I'm going to write about this so people will understand where I'm coming from. I'm not necessarily thinking I'm going to change a bunch of minds, just people understand. And so she told a very raw, very personal truth that was absolutely the truth, not her truth, the truth about what occurred to her. And the reaction was stunning. The anger at her, the anger at Nancy. It wasn't compassion, except with close friends. It wasn't understanding. It was, how dare you? How dare you? And you ask, like, what do you learn about your spouse in that circumstance? Well, one thing that I relearned is she has a spine of steel. She has a spine of steel. How dare you? That even though it was shocking, even though it was bewildering to face this, and I can honestly say we did not expect that. Even though it was shocking and bewildering, she was unbowed, and she believed, and I believe rightfully believed, that means that she had to talk and speak more. Because part of the problem that you have is that people will try to silence those who raise uncomfortable truths. It is a reflex action. The more I learned about it, the more I studied polarization, the more that I learned that actually what is happening to a lot of people, especially if you're very highly partisan, is people who are very highly partisan, they involuntarily experience a negative fact as a personal attack. It creates almost a fight or flight response. And so what we were learning, both with my story with Dale and Nancy's story with Donald, that there was, what we were dealing with is actually people's almost involuntary impulsive response. And that there is a lot of work that has to be done even before you hear the truth to prepare somebody for the truth.
Yeah, thank you. Well, as we were discussing possible titles for this event, you all proposed calling it The Perils of Telling the Truth to Your Own Tribe. So tell us why.
Do you want to start with that one?
Well, with like the Washington Post piece that I did, I thought that everybody was telling me the truth as I aged and grew up in this American culture, like under Ronald Reagan, and I thought everybody was telling me the truth, that we were the people who really cared about God and family values, and we were against, sin. And
I thought it was very clear we were anti-sin. Like I thought.
And so, like, I had never told the truth. I mean, I'd never, like, told anybody about this Washington Post, the contents of that, which was my abuse in the church context. But the people that came against me were conservative Christians. And they were so, like, I was, my vacation Bible school teacher was ne'er-do-well, predator. And so I was 12 when my abuse happened. And the conservative people started this internet thing where I was an adulteress, even though I was 12. And so like they would make memes online for that, which were awful. I won't even say what they were, but what I found out was that conservative Christians, at least whatever this is that we're dealing with right now, they sexualize their critique. So like you're not just wrong about tax policy, they find some sort of weird sexual angle and they humiliate you in that way. And I just honestly was not prepared for that.
Yeah, I would say this is just a basic fact about all of us, and it's something that I think we all have to be aware of, and that is, if we're on one side, if we're a partisan person, we live in this world where we are ready to overbelieve negative things about our opponents and underbelieve negative things about our allies. And so what then happens is for you to be convinced of a negative thing about your ally, you have to overprove it. You have to double prove it to demonstrate to somebody that their ally is wrong, that somebody they've previously admired is mired in scandal. But if you don't like the person, if they're on the opposite side politically, you're very willing to believe negative things. You're very willing to believe. And so what we're in this world where both sides of the aisle, because we've talked mainly about one side of the aisle, but both sides of the aisle right now in this country have very legitimate injury and grievance because their political opponents have been very willing to believe the worst of them, very willing to believe that they're terrible people. The statistics on this are crazy. So right now, if you're a partisan Republican, there's about an 85 to 90% chance you believe that Democrats are hateful, bigoted, intolerant. And if you're a Democrat, there's about an 85-90% chance, very similar, you're going to believe that the Republican is hateful and bigoted and intolerant. We have the same view of each other. It's not different, it's the same view. And then when we act on that, we actually inflict a moral injury on our political opponent. And so I have been convicted by 1 Corinthians 5. So there's nothing new under the sun. This temptation to overblame the outside and circle your wagons on the inside is the oldest phenomenon in the book. And Paul has some really interesting words in 1 Corinthians 5 where he says, "Who are you to judge those outside the church? God will be the judge. But within the church, it says, expel the wicked from among you." And so we often get this exactly backwards. We're hypercritical of the world outside the church, and we spend all of our time teaching the church how to protect themselves against the world. And then within the church, we are accepting of scandal. We look the other way when there is abuse because, well, we don't want to air our dirty laundry. We don't want people to think worse of us. Or so-and-so is doing so much to save souls. We don't want to interrupt that ministry. And so we provide immense amount of unmerited grace internally, and we're extraordinarily harsh to everybody else. And that's the opposite of the biblical model.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we have a number of students in the hall today here, and I know that for them, telling the truth is complicated. For university students who value open conversations and yet hold back on their real views on controversial topics. Here at UVA, there was a 2026 report that a significant number of students hesitate to disagree in class. Students here today, though, are joined with leaders from our community, faculty, staff, clergy, community, people who care deeply about our common life together. And I want to recognize some who are strengthening UVA's culture of dialogue, people like Mary Kate Carey, a professor, and her Think Again project. Of course, Melody Barnes, the director of the Karsh Institute of Democracy, Andres Ashew of the Office of Citizen Scholar Development and the Moral Courage College, to name just 3 people who are equipping students and all of us to speak honestly and to engage in disagreement with integrity. So I'm really grateful for all of you who are here, who demonstrate that you care, standing alongside David and Nancy today. David, I want to bring up one comment that you made in the New York Times, and that is that there is a single important thought that we should bring to each student, however ideologically or religiously committed they might be. And that thought is the question, what if I'm wrong? I love that. So you write 2 sentences here. What if I'm wrong? It is that recognition that can change a life. It is that recognition that can open a heart. And it's that recognition that allows us to turn to a friend, a neighbor, and even an ideological opponent and sincerely ask one of the most important questions you can ask: what do you think? So each of you teach at universities, you're with university students. So I'm curious to hear about maybe a time when you've taken your own advice and asked yourself, what if I'm wrong? And what happened then?
Oh, I can give you a chapter and verse on that, where I had to ask myself, what if I'm wrong? And the answer was yes. I'm really wrong. And it really does revolve around race in America. I grew up in the South, post-civil rights movement South, and there was this sort of ethos amongst white, middle class, upper middle class, educated folks that you don't say racist stuff. Like, you just don't do that. That is not something that polite, nice, kind people do. You just don't do it. And so I grew up in a peer group, even though I was in the rural Kentucky, that you just, even amongst friends in private, there was just none of that. We just didn't do this. This is not something that we did. And in my very limited and small peer group, if you were going to tell me America has a big problem with white people still being racist, I would have said, I don't see it. I don't see it. And then Black friends would say, this happened. Well, man, I hate that happened for you. What an unusual and exceptional thing that must be. And so, so I'm in this mindset where, because my experience was one way, what did I just say? People had to overprove to me. They had to overprove to me that something was wrong. And so for us, the big jolting moment was we were so blessed. We adopted a beautiful little girl from Ethiopia, and we brought her home to rural Tennessee. And it was not soon after that, it was soon after that we learned that her experience that she was having in rural Tennessee was extremely different from the experience that my 2 blonde, blue-eyed kids, our older 2 kids, were having. And it just continued to metastasize to the point where she had not able to go to a school in Tennessee where she was not called the N-word, where there weren't, her most recent school, people were drawing swastikas on the board of the class that she was in, and she was threatened by some people in a truck who were screaming, the racial epithets and almost ran her down after a football game. Horrific things, not to mention things that happened politically. And I wrote, right after the George Floyd murder, I wrote a piece that, until I came to the Times, was the most viral piece I'd ever written in my life. And it said, we've got so very far to go. Because always my emphasis was we've come so far. That was my emphasis. But then I had a changed emphasis, which is we have so much further to go. And I ended the whole thing by saying, please, I'm begging you, don't be like me. Don't be the person who has to experience in your own family reality before you will believe reality. Hear the testimony of others and believe their testimony. And it was the most, as I said, it's the most viral thing that I'd written before I came to the Times, and it was really a confession. It was a confession. People had to overprove reality to me, and it was sort of like my public repentance for that.
Thank you for that.
So for me, I am a writer, and I was a celebrity ghostwriter for GOP politicians. And so my spiritual gift, not listed in 1 Corinthians, is sarcasm. I specialized in making liberals drink their tears. And so I would go to Fox News and I would have my clients. I worked with the top people, the top Republican people, and I love all of my clients. And I even lived with Sarah Palin in her house in Alaska, where I could see Russia from her house. And and so I would go to Make America Great Again rallies, and because all of my clients would speak at them, and they were like Trump surrogates and stuff. And so once I was at a Make America Great Again rally, and I was like, okay, I don't know if this is where I should be, because it was just different, because I'd sort of learned about politics through the Mitt Romney campaign, and then the Trump campaign was slightly different. Mitt Romney was like Mr. Rogers, there was not even caffeine, but, and so I realized, because we have this daughter, Naomi, that we had adopted from Ethiopia, and they were like, come on up and get a picture with President Trump. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm at a rally with President Trump. This is what history will record me, like history cares about me. But my family will see this picture and draw conclusions from it. And I thought maybe I'm in the wrong place, like occupationally and geographically. But then God spoke to me very clearly. So this was not my own self-reflection. This was God speaking to me. I'm not even kidding. And he said that I was violating the 10 Commandments as a condition of my employment. And the 10 Commandments specifically that I was breaking was the one about not bearing false witness against your neighbor. Because I would bear false witness against my liberal neighbor if I had a liberal neighbor, which I did not because I lived in Tennessee. But I would have borne false witness against that guy. And so, because what I would do, I was like a speechwriter, and I did social media, and I wrote books for people. And so, have you ever heard of nut picking? It's a terrible phrase. But nut picking is when you find the nut in Topeka, Kansas, who's working at the DMV, and he or she is a rabid liberal or conservative, and they do something weird at the DMV. What I would do is I would say, well, that liberal, you have to be trans to get a driver's license in Topeka, because that's how liberals are. And it would not be true, because there's fringe people on both sides. And I would make it the most hyperbolic expression of, this is how Democrats are, obviously. And that just wasn't true. And I realized that because God spoke to me. I didn't have any self-reflection before that. And I had it at a Trump rally. And from that point forward, I just told all of my clients, I was like, I'm not going to bend the truth or be hyperbolic about our opponents. I'm only going to say true things. And I was not long for the world of politics because I was fired by everybody very quickly, or I quit. It was sort of hard to tell. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not that's the commandment. I didn't spend a lot of time with that commandment growing up. Thou shalt not bear false witness.
No, and it's actually very expansive.
Yeah.
It's so expansive. This might not be the right time to think about it. But
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
We talked about it before because it's more than just not lying about your neighbor. We looked it up and
So this is in the Westminster Larger Catechism, and I want you to read, this is the Westminster Larger Catechism's explanation of the 9th commandment. And I dare you to hear this and feel good about yourself. Okay, I promise you, okay.
Okay.
The duties required in the 9th commandment are the preserving and promoting of truth between man, and the good name of our neighbor as well as our own, appearing and standing for the truth, and from the heart, sincerely, freely, clearly, and fully speaking the truth, and only the truth, and matters of judgment and justice, and in all other things whatsoever, a charitable esteem of our neighbors, loving, desiring, and rejoicing in their good name. I'm going to stop that and say that again. Loving, desiring, and rejoicing in their good name. Sorrowing for and covering of their infirmities. Freely acknowledging of their gifts and graces. Defending their innocency. A ready receiving of a good report and an unwillingness to admit of an evil report. Think about that in the context of politics, guys. How many of us, if we really don't like a politician, if we hear that there's a scandal allegation, it's our best day. I knew they were bad. But the 9th commandment's like telling us, hold up. I'm not going to receive that negative report on even somebody I dislike. You're going to have to prove it. Like, okay. Unwillingness to meet an evil report concerning them, discouraging talebearers, flatterers, and slanderers, love and care of our own good name, and defending it when need requireth, keeping of lawful promises, studying and practicing whatever things are true, honest, lovely, and of good report. Guys, that's a challenge right there. That's a challenge. And think about, if you want to talk about how Christians can be countercultural, boom. Right there. You are countercultural if you are complying with the 9th commandment.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me of another thing that you've said, David, in your one of your columns. You talk about the upside-down kingdom of God. And you write, to oppress others is to oppress Christ. To hate others is to hate Christ. To love your enemies can be the most dangerous and revolutionary act of them all. So what does this dangerous Christianity look like right now?
Yeah, oh, that's a great question. So Nancy and I are both youth group kids. We grew up in evangelical youth groups from before we can even remember. And if there's one thing, especially if you grew up in the 80s and the 90s in youth group, you were told to prepare for the coming persecution. Like this was a big thing. The coming persecution, the end times. I'm old enough to remember the late great Planet Earth. Remember this? Like, it's all happening. Every time something happens in the Middle East for the last 30 plus years of my life, it's happening. Where's the red heifer? Is it at the Temple Mount? Like all of this stuff. And so you're in this mode where you're looking for persecution. You're just getting ready. I'm ready for persecution. And so I'm a junior in high school, and my friend goes, David, here, you want this joint? And I'm like, no. And he's like, nerd. I'm like, there it is, the persecution. There it is. I am feeling, I cannot wait to get back and testify at youth group. And so you're just kind of, you're waiting for it. You're waiting for it. Yeah. But I will tell you this, guys. I will tell you this. I have never experienced more hatred in my life than when I tried to love people I was told to hate. And when I tried to understand, when I tried to have grace and to show kindness towards people I was told were the enemy. And, when you go back and you reflect and you think about the process of the crucifixion, sort of the first ultimate act of persecution, okay? Yeah. And I'm just telling you this, and when I tell you this, I'm not comparing myself to Jesus in any way, shape, or form. Furthest thing ever, okay? But look at that moment with Barabbas, okay? At that moment with Barabbas, Jesus comes in and he's greeted and hailed as the conquering hero because the expectation was he was literally going to be the conquering hero. He was going to throw off the yoke of Roman oppression, etc. And very quickly in that Holy Week, people realize that he's not about that. He is not about overthrowing Caesar. And so at that key moment, they have a choice between Jesus and Barabbas, who was an insurrectionist. You know, when I grew up, I was taught he was a thief. That's all he was. Like, I thought of him like he's like the guy who boosts TVs at Walmart. No. This guy was an insurrectionist, right? And so they choose the insurrectionist over Jesus. And one of the core elements of the crucifixion was he was crucified for not hating and not defeating and not dominating and not destroying the people he was told that he had to destroy. And even up into the very last moments before he takes his last breath before his resurrection, he says, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." The people murdering him, literally murdering him, he says that. And the one thing that I have noticed, and when you look at the stories of martyrs, time and time again, what is the stand that they're taking? The stand they're taking is loving their neighbor. That's the stand that they're taking. And when I think about this hyper-polarized, angry moment, if you look who gets the most brutally attacked from their own side, it's often the person who extends the arm to the other side. That's who gets viciously attacked. And so when I was thinking about the upside-down kingdom of God, the upside-down kingdom of God is not that the world's logic is you hate your enemies. God's logic is you love your enemies. And what is it that's the direct collision between the world's logic and God's logic. And that direct collision always creates extreme friction here in this world. And so I will tell you, as the older you get, students who are here, I think some of the most challenging moments you will face as a believer will come in showing kindness to people who've been cruel to you. And that you will find that is shockingly unpopular. Especially in a highly tribal moment where the most important thing isn't compassion, it's tribal solidarity. And so that for me was one of the most jolting things. I used to think of that as squishy Christianity, like loving your neighbors. I remember Russell Moore tells a story of a pastor speaking on Beatitudes, and at the end of the sermon, an angry person came up and he says, "What are you doing telling all these liberal talking points?" And he's like, "It's Matthew 5, man." But it turns out that squishy Christianity is often the most difficult form of Christianity of them all.
Thank you. What are you thinking about, Nancy?
Well, so nobody really cares about what I think, like in a national scale, except you guys. But so I decided to not, I don't have a national platform really. And so I decided after I wrote that Washington Post piece in 2016, and all the conservative people were so mad at me inexplicably, I decided to just not, this is a social media story. On Twitter, I decided to follow people who showed kindness. That was my only thing. And I normally didn't follow a bunch of Democrats just because you don't. And so I followed this lady named Kathy Kattenberg, or I thought she was a lady. Her profile picture was just like I stand with the immigrants icon, so I didn't even know if she was a real person. And so she was very kind to me about my Washington Post piece, and I followed her, but I very quickly realized that she was not a fan of one of us. And she hated David French with the hottest burning passion. And she was so David would write a column about being pro-life, and she would say, "Well, I've had 4 abortions, and therefore you should blah, blah, blah." And then he would write about racism, and she'd say, "Why don't you take a step back, and because you're the one who's right." I mean, just over the top stuff. She said he hated people in various ways. And I have always noticed that, and I was like, this lady is, she would sometimes tweet 10 times a day against him. And of course, he never saw it because he, doesn't pay attention to such things. And so I ignored it for a long time. But in 2005, I made this New Year's resolution that if I saw someone that was in duress, that I would try to help, which has gotten to me in a lot of weird situations. But she tweeted that, this was in 2020, she tweeted that she said, "I will never get food. The whatever delivery service in New York wasn't working." And she's like, "I'm never going to get food again. This is awful." And I thought, oh my gosh, I think Kathy Kattenberg, if she's even a person, might be food insecure, right? And so I messaged her, and I was like, "Kathy Kattenberg, this is Nancy French, David's wife. do you need food? Like, what's going on with you? And she's like, here's my phone number, call me. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I do not call people on the phone because it's not 1987, right? But I got on the phone and she had this New York accent. I sound like I fell off like a turnip truck. She had this beautiful New York accent. And I was like, hey, Kathy. And she was like, Nancy, I have been eating pancake mix for 6 weeks. She's like, I have no food. She apparently was this disabled hermit in New York, and she could not leave. She was hermit because she couldn't leave the house, like physically. So she had no food and nobody to help her. And I was like, okay, Kathy Kattenberg, I'm ready for this. And so I was like, what kind of things do you need? And it was like, she loved chimichangas from Aldi. She needed diced tomatoes for some recipe that she loved. And it was so weird to be in this conversation with Kathy because she hated us, or we thought. And we were just finding out that she had a toilet paper shortage was very like sobering and, you know, like beautiful. Like we just, every day we talked on the phone. And finally she was like, why are you helping me? And I was like, I don't know, Kathy, Jesus, like, you know, Kathy was Jewish, you know, and I was like, I don't know, there's this thing, it's the Bible, and super inconvenient, but, and so we just got to be friends, and every day, but I couldn't get the groceries delivered. Like, I called all these synagogues, because I thought maybe that would be a good way. I called all the Presbyterian churches, because that's where I had attended, and nobody could help, because the need in New York City was so great. So 4 days passed, and I thought I was going to have to drive to New York and deliver this food to Kathy. And I was like, Kathy, I don't know what to do. I said, I just don't know what to do except just pray. And that's the kind of thing that you say, but you do not want to do, because nobody wants to do that. And so she was like, okay, well, pray. And I was like, you mean out loud? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, Kathy, you're Jewish. I'm going to say something wrong that is going to be offensive to you. And she goes, I don't care. I'm so hungry. And I was like, okay. So I was like, dear God, please get Kathy Kattenberg food. Kathy Kattenberg, who's a real person. And anyway, within hours, the first delivery, because I'd placed deliveries through like Uber, like all these various things, Amazon, Whole Foods, whatever, Instacart. So she called me just weeping, and she was like, I've got 4 bananas and 2 pounds of meat, and it all came, thank you so much. So then an hour later, and all my other shipments came. So she's like, I've got 30 bananas and 10 pounds of meat. But I love Kathy Kattenberg so much, and to this day, we are dear friends. She says I'm the best friend she's ever had. We talk on the phone. We used to get together and watch sermons online together. We did a little book club together, and every time that I talk to her to this day, this many years later, she says, you know, I have not changed her opinion on anything. She is really, really, really liberal, and I'm still the same person. But every phone call we end by telling each other that we love each other.
Mm-hmm.
That is.
And then one of the fun like denouement to that story is that Nancy was asked to tell a story about our marriage, very funny story about our marriage at the Moth, which is a storytelling event. It was in Lincoln Center. So Nancy's first time as a storyteller is at Lincoln Center, which is...
And I killed it. It was great.
Go big or go home. I mean, what was special for me is we invited Kathy to come and meet our whole family, and it was her first time to come back into the city forever. And I got to walk her arm in arm, my #1 Twitter troll. I got to walk her arm in arm until we sat together and watched Nancy just deliver this marvelous performance. Very, very special moment.
Well, that is the upside down kingdom of God.
Yes.
Indeed,
yeah,
indeed.
Absolutely.
Well, we have so many questions in the room, and what we've decided to do is we've invited certain guests to ask questions of you that I hope will speak for all of us. So Jacqueline is going to help. Fifi is going to start us off. She's a student that we've met at the top. So Fifi, what would you like to ask?
Hello, thank you so much for coming and sharing your experience with all of us. My name is Fionette King, and I'm a 4th-year student here. And I'm curious, how does your life now compare to what you dreamt it would be when you were a college student? And what advice would you have for college students like me who are fourth years and who are about to enter that new stage of their life and enter the job market?
Okay, I have limited college experience because I dropped out of 3. Actually, I have a lot of college experience because I dropped out of 3.
She loved the lawn out there, so UVA admissions.
This could be it.
Yeah.
But so I was 20 when we met, and I decided on the second date that I would marry him, and we got married very quickly after that. So I dropped out of college and dropped out. But for some reason, I never in a million years would have dreamed what our lives are like. I thought I was ambitious. I don't know why I thought that. But I just couldn't imagine. So my 3-degree major options at the 3 different colleges that I dropped out of were politics, philosophy, and English. And I'm a writer that writes about philosophical things related to politics. I sort of am in the realm, but I never in a million years would have thought that I'd be able to do all the things that I could do. I'm shocked every morning that I wake up that I get to do all of this stuff. And I've been able to just, I have 6 New York Times bestsellers. I teach at the University of Chicago and I don't have a degree.
Problem for you, Chicago. You shouldn't have told us that publicly. They have accreditation. No, I'm kidding.
No, seriously. No, somebody had made a terrible decision at U Chicago, but I never figured it out. I just kept quitting things that weren't right until I found the thing that was right, and the thing that was really right was you, because when we got married, it changed the trajectory of my life in a million different ways. He's the one who taught me how to write, to be completely honest, and so I just feel very thankful that I've been able to do any of it, and it's nothing that I predicted.
It's a great question. I'm going to say absolutely not. I didn't predict I was going to be a New York Times columnist in December of 2022. Okay, until literally Katie Kingsbury, my boss, comes to Nashville, takes me to dinner, and on the way there, Nancy says, she's going to ask you to work at the Times. I was like, no. First thing that happens when we sit down is she asked me to, and so I had no idea. This is not a big plan. But what I would say is a couple of things. One is, I do actually think that God sparks passions in our heart. I really do believe that. And the passion isn't necessarily, I'm going to be famous or I'm going to be successful. It's going to be, I have a passion in a particular direction, a heart for other people in a particular direction. And so for me, I am wired I am hardwired anti-bully. That's whatever the Enneagram for that is. What is, I don't know, Enneagram 6, anti-bully, whatever. But I'm very hardwired in that direction, and it took me towards justice work. It took me towards defending those who didn't have a voice. And one of the I loved that first case, the first big constitutional case had for this little bitty church in rural Kentucky that was facing a government that literally said, we can and will define how you worship. That's what they said to this small church, And so defending people who've been bullied and defending people who are facing struggles has been a burning passion of mine. And that's manifested itself in different career paths. But then let me give you some super practical advice that my uncle gave me, and I've never forgotten it. This is the best career advice. It's 3 pieces of career advice. This is not high philosophical stuff. Number 1, in a job interview, if you've got options, pick the place where you like the people the most, because you're going to be spending more waking hours with them than your spouse. So that's one. That's kind of scary, but it's true. Number 2, don't get too good at something you don't like doing, or you'll do it the rest of your life. That's another piece of advice. And number 3, when in doubt, take the option-expanding choice. So this is one reason why students, if you don't know what you want to do in life, like I didn't, I graduated from college with a political science undergrad degree, and my options at that point were grad school or flipping burgers. They were not hiring political scientists third shift at Nissan, And so I chose law school, and it was an option expanding choice. And at different points I've had, do I take a choice that narrows my options, or do I take a choice that expands? So those are three practical pieces that are not super philosophical, but actually might be the most valuable thing you hear today. I don't know.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Hi guys, it's so much fun. So I've been serving as mayor of Richmond for a little over a year, and I've realized in that time that, as much as my job is leading local government, it is as much or more shepherding and pastoring and creating community. And so you guys have been in and around politics for so long, and I think the question is, what should I and other local leaders like myself who have the opportunity to be a different kind of voice and force in our communities, what's the playbook? What are the behaviors and the practices that I should really focus on? Yeah.
Well, let me put it this way. What I'm about to tell you is going to end your political career. Because about all the politicians I admire are just out now. But I will say this. I think, and this is my theory of the case, all right? This is my theory of the case about sort of talking about hope right now. So I want to flip around and talk about hope. So if you follow American politics, you're probably familiar with the term called a thermostatic reaction. And a thermostatic reaction is why we often see one side wins a big victory in 2016, and then in 2018, the other side wins this really big victory, and then it flips back and forth. It's happened so many times, and it's because when one side kind of goes a little too far one direction, the American people snap them back. And that's called the thermostatic reaction. We normally think about it in terms of policies, who's too liberal, who's too conservative. But it also works on character. And so, for example, let me give you an example from history. After 1974 and Richard Nixon's resignation, that was the imperial presidency. There was corruption and cruelty radiating out from the Nixon administration that, if you learn about it now, it's mind-blowing, some of the stuff that happened. And so the first presidential election after the Nixon resignation was 76. And America went with a Baptist Sunday school teacher who banned playing Hail to the Chief because it was too monarchical, walked on his own inauguration parade, and would often just wear sweaters like I'm wearing now instead of the perfectly fitted suit and all of that, because he wanted to return the presidency to humility. And now people didn't necessarily love the way his actual presidency turned out, but that reaction against the cruelty of Nixon towards the kindness of Carter, that's a form of thermostatic reaction. And I will tell you this, Mr. Mayor, I'm seeing evidence that the people are ready for kindness. I'm seeing evidence. People are ready for humility. They're ready for kindness. And, I think it's going to land on people like an oasis in a desert. And I don't know when it's going to happen. It could be another term or two, but I think we're going to get there. And we're going to look back and we're going to say that the thermostatic reaction of the American people was away from cruelty towards kindness, away from arrogance towards humility. And the politicians that can demonstrate that and walk that walk, I think are going to be the front end on a national revival of community in this country.
And what is the name of that New York City mayor that just got elected? No, I'm serious.
Mom Donnie, yeah.
Yeah, I was listening. I'm sorry, I don't pay attention to politics very much. But I was listening to a podcast that was the lady who helped him form his campaigns as it pertained to community. And they did all kinds of crazy stuff. Like in New York, they had scavenger hunts and parties where they were just doing sort of random stuff. And I feel like the hole in our heart is one of community. And he actually was able to capitalize on that. And so when I listened to that Ezra Klein podcast talking about the building of community in New York, I tried to emulate it in my own building in Chicago. Not running for anything, but I just tried to sow into the people near me. And one of the things that I did was a book club, and then my neighbor invited me to an improv thing, so I joined an improv troupe. I just said yes to everything that came my way, and it's just been really interesting. And because I really have gotten to know the people that I'm physically closest to. And I just feel like all of us could invest in the people closest to us, people who are bodily represented in our neighborhood or in our church.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Matt Weber. I've worked at the University of Virginia for about 8 years, but in higher education for 20. And I love higher ed because I like to think I get to wake up every day and focus on truth, beauty, and goodness. And that jives quite nicely with my Catholic upbringing. But truth and trust in institutions seems to be getting a little bit foggy right now, especially in higher education. People don't tend to trust it as much. I'm wondering, with a magic wand from the two of you, where can we, many of us who work at the University of Virginia and in higher education, what can we do on a day-to-day basis to promote truth, beauty, and goodness and change the narrative on higher education?
Oh boy, okay, well, books need to be written about that one. But it's
We've got time.
We got time. It's a great question. If I had to pinpoint a reason for, there are many reasons, but let me pinpoint one as a reason for the decline in trust in institutions, is people began to see institutions as primarily self-interested and self-preservation interested, as opposed to purpose-oriented. So, I'll give you an example from Nancy's work. She did this incredible multi-year investigation of this very huge, popular Christian camp that hosted multiple sexual predators, turned the other way, win hundreds. The prosecutor in the case, one of the cases, estimated in just one predator had hundreds of victims on the camp. And what was very clear is that the priority of the institution, as soon as this problem emerged, was self-preservation over justice. It was spin and public relations over truth. Because they believed that what they were doing was so important and so great that they couldn't let anything sidetrack it. And what they missed was that by pursuing self-preservation over justice, they were sidetracked, they were blowing up the whole thing. And so I think that the institutions that are able to institutionally demonstrate humility and a commitment to justice internally are the ones that are going to emerge from this moment. Because what people are desperate for is integrity right now. They're just desperate for it. It's more than success. They are desperate for integrity. And so I think that the institutions of higher education that can show moral courage, a commitment to integrity, genuine self-reflection in the face of scandal, they're the ones that are going to emerge from this moment. Because we've all heard spin, guys. We all are familiar with spin. We're all familiar with non-disclosure agreements. We're all familiar with all of that nonsense that's just crushing us. I think it's the people who can come forward and say, we were bad and we're going to do better. And there's a great example of this. I'm a vet. A lot of people are really unfamiliar with the turnaround of the American military in the eyes of the public. When the Vietnam War ended, the American military was in the toilet on public approval, just in the toilet. And you know what is one of the untold stories is one of the ways the military came back was they went to the chaplain corps and they said, teach us virtue again. Teach us virtue. And so the chaplain corps doubled down around Aquinas, Augustine, Aristotle's virtues, Stoic virtues, and really you began to see the American military flip around and lead with integrity first. And that had a ripple effect that it is still to this day the most trusted public institution in the United States. And so what I would say to any institution that is facing a crisis of confidence, there's a blueprint. There is a blueprint. It's called virtue. And I think that that's the path forward.
Yeah, and about the institutions, there's this theologian named Curtis Chang, and he has this very interesting,
Curtis, yes, Curtis.
He has this very interesting theology of institutions, and he says that every institution that exists whether or not they know it in some sort of divine function. So if you work at the highway department in the state of Tennessee, you're laying down roads that make communication and connectivity possible, which is divine. A hospital, healing, divine. A camp, Christian athletics, that's a divine thing. And he says that once the institution deviates from its original purpose, it's idolatry. So for example, in the Christian camp, they, instead of focusing on glorifying God through Christian athletics, they pivoted, and their number one thing became brand management. They wanted to make sure that I didn't destroy them through my journalism. They wanted to cover up all the sex abuse. And so Curtis Chang, who's a friend of mine, he called me and he was like, it's just idolatry. And so when the institution decides to value their brand higher than whatever their original divine purpose is, it's idolatry. And what do idols demand? The sacrifice of women and children. Mm-hmm. And you can see that over and over and over, literally, in our world.
Thank you. Walter.
Thank you so much for what you've done and shared. My name is Walter Kim, and as you know, I served as a pastor and I work with national religious organizations. In some ways, this question is a bit of summary in nature. You've done a magnificent job diagnosing our problems. You've illustrated, given us some concepts. If you were to create a syllabus of Christian practices that could be broadly applicable to produce a greater sense of cohesion, what would be on that syllabus?
Oh, yeah, it's such a plant. Let me talk about the syllabus we created. No, I love that question because it really does dive into some of the deepest questions that we're facing. And we created a syllabus called the After Party, which Nancy, it's so marvelous to be married to such a creative person, because I had this idea for a Christian curriculum to sort of reframe how we thought about politics. And here was my name for it. Are you ready? The Post-Partisan Christian Project. I mean, aren't you like sprinting to the bookstore to... And so Nancy came up with something infinitely better called the After Party. In other words, after the political party, and then also referring to kind of the wedding feast of the Lamb, the after party, at the second coming, and so it was a beautiful name. But what we really did is we tried to explain to people that for years and years and years, Christians were taught what Christian engagement in politics meant was you had to believe in this particular set of issues. It was all issue focused, right? So if you're a Christian conservative, that means you're going to focus on abortion and sexuality. Those are the issues, and then you're doing the litmus testing, right? And each different faction would have a different set of issues. But when you really look at Scripture spends a lot more time telling Christians how to treat their neighbor than it spends telling Christians what public policies to advance. A lot more, like a ton more. Now, it doesn't mean that public policies are meaningless, but what we're dealing with, though, was that Christians in politics were behaving very differently from Christians in other areas. Like a Christian businessman, if I met them, it would not be like, what's the object of a Christian businessman? To make as much money as possible for the Lord. That would, instead, like somebody who's a holistically Christian person would say, I want to treat my customers with dignity and respect. I want to treat my peers with respect. I want to treat my employees with kindness. That they would show Jesus in the fullness of their life and interaction. But then when we got to politics, it was policy, 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 policy. And then if you weren't on board with the policies, you had to be destroyed. And you began to see from Christians writing things like civility and decency are second-order values. That the way in which you treat another human being was secondary to the political victory. And so what we tried to do with the after party was we centered it around Micah 6:8. And we said, Micah 6:8 says, what does the Lord require of you, O man? What is good? It is to act justly, okay? So we can't forsake justice for the sake of being the nicest person in the room, right? This was a problem with a lot of white Southerners in the Jim Crow era. They literally were upset about civil rights, not so much because they believed and appreciated the way their black neighbors were being treated, but they didn't like the disruption. Everybody was mad at each other. You cannot forsake justice, so you have to act justly. Also, love kindness or love mercy, depending on the translation, and to walk humbly before the Lord your God. So these are three non-waivable obligations. All of them, humility, kindness, and justice at once. And you can't forsake kindness for justice. You can't forsake justice for kindness. And then the question was, how do we put this all together practically? How do you do this? And we're like, guys, we got a whole model for it. It's called the Civil Rights Movement. It's called the Civil Rights Movement. Is anybody in here willing to say that Martin Luther King Jr. was insufficiently committed to justice? He gave his life for it. He gave his life for it. But will anyone sit here and say that Martin Luther King was cruel? Or that the Civil Rights Movement was cruel? That it pursued it pursued virtuous means through vicious ends? No. You can read the commitment cards that King required of marchers in Selma, Birmingham. And what does it say? It says stuff like, avoid violence of heart and tongue. It says, our goal is reconciliation, not victory. What? Meditate on the life and teachings of Jesus Christ. And so, guys, however bad things are now, by the grace of God, we're not in Jim Crow right now. And how did that end? How did that end? Not through an exclusively Christian movement. There were atheists and Jews and people from different religious traditions who came down to the South and in some cases gave their lives, right? But this was a Christian-led movement of justice that never lost sight of kindness. And what did we achieve as a result of that? We were able to achieve a degree of justice and mercy in this country. Again, we're very far from where we need to be, that we had never achieved before. And I will say this, if you forsake mercy for the sake of justice, you'll get neither. And so that's, I think that reframing our Christian politics around justice and mercy, and here's the interesting thing, and I'm going on too long, I'm so sorry.
No, you're not. You're good.
Micah 6:8 does not say pursue power, okay? Because what happens to a lot of us as we get into this mindset, this is, I love justice, but I can't achieve justice until I have power. So what then happens? Then the whole motivation becomes power. And then once you get power in this country is not secure because you have elections coming every now and then you have to maintain it. And so power becomes the central focus. You don't have to have power to pursue justice. Ask Rosa Parks. Had no power, and yet pursued justice, right? So I think when we are putting the power horse before the justice cart, that's the right order. The horse is before the cart. We're putting the power cart before the justice horse. Okay, let's get that straight. And so when I'm thinking about how do we reframe Christian politics, I think of it around Micah 6:8.
It's very hard to follow that, but I will just say, as someone who's tried to pursue justice on this camp issue forever and had limited success, I feel like we know that justice is coming. Like, that is not, that is an actual promise in the scripture. It's not imaginary. We might not see it here. And so, like, all of my work in the Kanakuk investigation, I had to reevaluate the way that I was pursuing it. For some reason, I thought that once I revealed all the bad stuff happening at this camp, that the Christian world would stop and applaud me and I'd get some sort of award. Best Christian. But I sort of was met with a collective shrug of the shoulders. But I still am working on it, and here's why. It's because I feel like I'm like one of those people standing outside with a sign, the end of the world is nigh. But it's not that's not the message. The message is justice is coming. And I'm just reminding people of that. Justice is a thing, and we're all going to have to deal with it. And even if I don't have incredible success here, it's important to remind people about how justice is real, and it's like something that we should be trying to grasp.
Yes. Well, I have the privilege of asking a final question. This is back to the personal. So you have 3 children. What are their ages?
27, 25, and 18, and then a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old grandchildren, and another one on the way.
Oh, nice. So what does all this look like on the playground or when there's a fight at dinner?
So a bit about our kids. My oldest daughter is a 1L at the University of Chicago, married to a 3L at the University of Chicago. My son is a 1L at Northwestern.
All three law schools.
And also his girlfriend is a 3L in law school. And our youngest daughter, she's not set for law school, but she's grown up in that world. So we're very verbal. We're very verbal, but I will tell you this, the way in which I feel like the best parenting we've done is trying to walk our talk, and try to show, not tell. And that's manifested itself in a couple of ways. So for example, I just, when I was in my mid-30s, I just felt a strong burning conviction that I had supported the war in Iraq, and I was sitting at home and other people were fighting and dying, and I just felt a sense of conviction that was just not the way I should walk the talk. And we talked about it and prayed about it, and Nancy was incredibly supportive. And one of the things that we said was, how do you, when you have kids in this incredibly prosperous country where they live lives like of material prosperity, if you're middle class, upper middle class, and in this country you're living in world historic prosperity and ease, and how do you teach them that there are things that are more important than yourself? Well, you got to show it, right? And how do you teach people to love your enemies? You got to show it. And there's this story about Nancy I want to tell at the end that I think is very indicative of who Nancy is and what the moment is. And so Nancy told the story about Kathy Kattenberg. I love that story. I love Kathy. She's the best. I love her. But anyway, I really love that. And Nancy wrote the story and was invited to a small Christian college in Nashville area to give this talk. And so she gives this talk about loving your enemies, and it centers around Kathy Kattenberg. And it's the Kathy Kattenberg story. And then we get to the Q&A, and people are just, really loving the story and really appreciating it. And a young man raises his hand, the first question. And I've done a lot of talks at colleges, and I can always tell when somebody's about to blast me, because they're sitting there in the audience, and then they're the first one to the microphone, and they've got the phone already out, and they've got the screen, and I'm like, oh boy, here it comes. So this young man stands up, and he's got the look on his face, and he's got his question ready, and he very aggressively says to her, "So did you love or merely tolerate your abuser?" Which was, in the way it was asked, was very, it was, it came across as like trying to catch her as a hypocrite, because she just talked, and she hadn't talked about abuse at all. And it hit Nancy. You could see the question hit Nancy like a ton of bricks. It just hit her like a ton of bricks. And so she starts tearing up on the stage, and she couldn't talk. And so she got down from the stage, and there's like 2 or 3 women in the audience who just pop up immediately. And she goes in, leaves the room, and everybody's stunned. And I'm torn, like I'm her husband, and I'm like, do I go over there and inflict pain and suffering on this guy, or do I go comfort my wife who's in tears, right? So I chose the go comfort Nancy. I went, and she was, and these other women who, by the way, had come out and followed her because they were also abuse survivors. So think about that, guys. In a relatively small gathering, there were immediately 3 other women who could stand up, who'd been through her experience. And she comes out and she says, "I'm so embarrassed, what should I do?" And I said, and we were thinking he was hostile, right? I said, well, I don't, and I don't know if this is good advice or not. I said, I don't think that you can let that be the final word. And Nancy walked back out there, and she looked at him, and the next thing that happened was one of the most beautiful things that I've ever witnessed, is that then the young man apologized, and he said, "I was asking that question, I didn't know how to ask it because I've been abused." And so he was wanting to know how to walk through that in a world, when the scripture says love your enemies, and who would be the worst enemy in your life, right? And so all of a sudden Nancy turns from this pain into this moment of love and compassion for this young man. And doesn't just hear him, but like honors him in that moment and honors his courage to make that statement in this moment. And I think about this all the time because I think of this two-stage thing that we often skip stage two, where stage one is I've been smacked in the face. Something has hit me right in my face and it hurts, and it hurts. But stage two then has the curiosity to think, what's the story of the person who just hit me in the face? What's their story? What's going on with them? And Nancy's ability, which I was in awe of in the moment, to just turn around and immediately move from pain to compassion when she learned one more fact, one more salient fact. And if I could leave us with sort of a charge, it would be to learn that fact about the people around you, about the people in your lives, including people who take you on, who might be cruel to you, who might be brutal to you. Now, I'm very well aware that there are people you have to separate from. It happens. There are evil people in this world, and sometimes for self-preservation, you have to separate from people. I'm fully aware of that. But if we create what I call a rebuttable presumption of good faith, in other words, just start from the standpoint of a person is approaching me in good faith, and just start with that. And the way we can push through even the most difficult moments to achieve something true and good and beautiful, I will never forget that. I will never forget that. And as a mother, showing that to her kids, I can't think that's better than 8 million lectures. To just do it, And so, I'm often asked, do I have hope? Do I have hope about the future? And I absolutely have hope. And it's moments like that give me hope. And it was unexpected, it was unanticipated, it's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen.
Aw.
Please join me in thanking David and Nancy.
What a rich conversation. Thank you both for bringing your stories, your lives, your presence to us. We're going to take a few minutes to just be with this conversation, with the words you've shared, with the heart you've brought. Paula's going to play another song as we do that. And then our good friend, Reverend Dr. Mrs. Carolyn Mitchell-Dillard, will say a few final words.
Your labor is not in vain, though the ground underneath you is cursed and stained. Your planting and reaping are never the same. Your labor is not in vain. Your labor is not unknown, though the rocks they cry out and the sea it may groan. The place of your toil may not seem like a home. Your labor is not unknown. I am with you. I am with you, yes, I am with you, for I've called you by name. Your labor is not in vain. The vineyards you plant will bear fruit. Fields will sing out and rejoice with the truth. For all that is old will at last be made new. The vineyards you plant will bear fruit. I am with you. I am with you. I am with you. Yes, I am with you. For I've called you by name. Your labor is not in vain. The houses you labored to build will finally with laughter and joy be filled. The serpent that hurts and destroys shall be killed, and all that is broken will be healed. I am with you. I am with you. Oh, yes, I am with you. I am with you. I am with you. Yes, I am with you. For I've called you by name. Your labor is not in vain.
Wow. How beautiful to be reminded that He is with us and that our labor is not in vain. Whew. Well, thank you, because I had planned to come up with some jokes and all this, but you kind of messed that up. Good Lord. Okay. Thank you, Nancy and David, for the moving conversation, which was truly remarkably moving. I think my name is Reverend Dr. Carolyn Mitchell Dillard. I'm with the Center for Community Partnerships here at UVA, and I'm a local pastor. I am honored to be a member of the 2026 Scoper Lecture Host Committee and a friend of Theological Horizons. And thank you all for joining us this afternoon. One thing I can say is that I believe that none of us will leave the same. Nancy and David have given us much manna to feast upon. And I'd like to offer you some food for thought through questions, just 2 questions. What touched your heart and inspires you to take the mantle forward? What has been said this evening that has inspired you to take the mantle forward? And how are we going to take action on the call to tell the truth in all of its complexities as you return home to your community? One way you can stay active is by engaging with Theological Horizons in conversations like this. Today's lecture has been made possible by the generosity of Steve and Nancy Scoper, and we are gratefully honored. Thank you. And from the financial support of people like you. Please join me in ensuring that theological horizons can and will continue to bring us together at the intersection of faith, thought, and life. If you are moved by something you heard today, and I'm certain that you were, I hope you'll consider making a contribution to Theological Horizons. Also on your program, be certain to scan the QR code on your program for a chance to win a copy of Nancy French's book that you will not be able to put down, entitled Ghosted. You'll also be invited to upcoming Theological Horizons events. We look forward to seeing you all again. Until then, let's close our time together with a benediction. Let us pray. O Holy One, thank you for this opportunity to gather together, to glean and to reflect. May what we've experienced in this place this afternoon inspire us to press forward, loving all and serving you. May the Lord Christ go with you wherever he may send you. May he guide you through the wilderness and protect you through the storm. May he bring you home rejoicing at the wonders he has shown you. May he bring you home rejoicing once again into our doors. Amen, and God bless you all. Go in peace.